Hi, my name is Catherine, and welcome to my channel where we talk about books you should read instead of stuff you should buy. Today, I want to explore whether large language models like ChatGPT are to blame for our declining literacy rates. I got a few comments about this on my last video, You Don't Hate AI, You Hate Capitalism, and I figured it's a topic worthy of its own video. The claim is that LLMs enable people to offload all of their thinking, and this has caused a societal decline in literacy and critical thinking skills. So let's look at the data on literacy rates. A study conducted on American literacy from the National Center for Educational Statistics shows that from 2017 to 2023, the percentage of Americans ages 16 to 65 who can read at or below level 1 jumped from 19% to 28%. They define level 1 proficiency as being able to understand short text with simple wording and follow explicit instruction, but unable to comprehend longer passages, make inferences, or do comparative analysis. This is obviously concerning, but it's worth pointing out that this test measures English literacy, and a subset of that population are non-English speakers. But the percentage increase of functional illiteracy does not correspond with a similar increase in non-English speaking immigrants, so immigration does not explain this sudden decline. And while you could argue that AI tools have exacerbated the problem, this decline began years before LLMs became mainstream. ChatGPT wasn't released until the end of 2022, so it's not accurate to say that AI has caused this problem. So what is the cause? We don't know exactly, but researchers point to a combination of factors including changes in school curriculum and reading instruction methods, a cultural decline in reading for pleasure due to social media use, and most notably, COVID disruptions. School closures led many students to fall behind, and absenteeism has increased since schools were reopened. Starting in the 1980s, many school districts across the country adopted a teaching method called whole language learning, which de-emphasized phonics. In the year 2000, the government commissioned the National Reading Panel to review all of the existing research on the topic, and they concluded that students given systematic phonics instruction had significantly better reading outcomes. This does not explain the sharp decline from 2017 to 2023, but it does explain why we were so vulnerable to systemic shocks. Mississippi reintegrated phonics instruction in 2013, and literacy rates rose substantially, ranking 49th in 2013 and 29th in 2019. Post-COVID data shows that Mississippi students were much more resilient to COVID disruptions, so that's promising. In addition to school closures, COVID lockdowns led to a major rise in screen time. I mean, understandably. Much of our activities shifted from in-person to remote, and social media became our primary way of connecting with others. Streaming services became the dominant form of entertainment, and Pew Research indicates that our screen habits have not returned to pre-COVID levels. I touched on this in my video, You Don't Hate Social Media, You Hate Capitalism. Smartphones and social media are not inherently problematic. Excess screen time is harmful because of the opportunity cost. If you're spending all day scrolling on your phone, you're neglecting other activities you know are good for you, such as reading books. Social media bad is very reductive. Social media is fine. I would go as far to say beneficial in moderation. But it's undeniable that the proliferation of hyper-palatable entertainment media alongside reduced reading proficiency due to ineffective instruction has driven down interest in reading for pleasure. Struggling through text is not exactly fun, especially when there's an infinite stream of engaging content available to us 24/7. So yeah, I'd say a key reason adult literary proficiency is on the decline is that nobody reads books anymore. We're out of practice, and if you don't use it, you lose it. But hope is not lost. I was able to conquer my bad screen habit and build back my reading stamina, which I talk about in this video. Anyway, it's clear that COVID lockdowns had major negative consequences for society, but they were ultimately necessary. We can't just allow a deadly virus to rip through the population. So it's important that we address the other factors that made us so vulnerable so we can build up resilience to future shocks. And that involves overthrowing the capitalist system that fundamentally corrupts our democracy so that we can properly fund science and education and build pro-social infrastructure. AI tools like ChatGPT have negative consequences, no doubt, but I think banning or discouraging them altogether is the wrong approach. Because they do have positive use cases, and under democratic control, aka public ownership, negative side effects could be mitigated. So let's talk about the pros and cons of LLMs on literacy and cognition specifically, and how to use this technology responsibly. As I mentioned earlier, the NCES report does not currently include data beyond 2023, which was around the time that ChatGPT hit the mainstream. If we continue to see a sharp decline in literacy rates, it's reasonable to hypothesize that LLMs are a contributing factor. But as of right now, we simply don't know. It would not be all that surprising if we do continue to see a decline, given that LLMs allow for a great amount of cognitive offloading and make it easier for students to cheat. Cognitive offloading is pretty self-explanatory. It's using tools to reduce the cognitive demands of certain tasks. Some amount of cognitive offloading is good. We don't need to exert mental effort memorizing a grocery list when we can just write it down. But too much cognitive offloading leads to overall cognitive decline, which worsens as we age. If you want to stay sharp, you gotta use your brain. Like I said in my last video, if you are using these tools in place of your brain, that's a clear problem. But if you're using them to outsource basic tasks so you can turn your focus to more cognitively challenging tasks, that's a clear win. Refusing to use AI in situations where it's beneficial is irrational. It's like refusing to use a calculator or Microsoft Excel or spell check. But refusing to use AI in situations where it's detrimental is very rational. I guess the main point I want to drive home is that we can oppose certain use cases of AI without opposing the technology itself. I saw ChatGPT as mostly detrimental and avoided using it until my husband convinced me of its positive use cases. Now I use it as a secondary search engine. Google has become so enshittified over the years that I often find ChatGPT to be a superior search engine. You'll get answers much quicker, though of course you have to verify them. While ChatGPT will occasionally hallucinate and spit out false information with competence, so will humans. You can't trust everything AI says, just as you can't trust everything some random blogger says. Regardless of whether you use Google or ChatGPT, you have to apply skepticism and cross-check multiple references. The way to get closest to the truth is to narrow your search by asking for scientific sources only, and ask from both angles. For example, if you want to know if grass-fed beef is sustainable, you can search, "Show me evidence that grass-fed beef is sustainable from scientific sources only," and then search, "Show me evidence that grass-fed beef is unsustainable from scientific sources only." This is the extent to which I use AI to assist in my writing process, the same way I previously used Google, for research, brainstorming, and testing my ideas. To me, using ChatGPT in this way is no different than using Google in place of a physical dictionary or thesaurus. It's simply quicker to find what you're looking for. Considering I will fact-check what I find regardless, why would I sift through multiple pages of search results when I can just ask ChatGPT for a summary of what experts are saying on a topic? But I think using AI to assist with drafting, organizing, and writing is a slippery slope to losing a very important skill, especially when it comes to creative work such as books or essays, but I don't even like using it to draft work emails. As someone who does a lot of writing and used to edit papers as a side hustle in college, I usually disagree with the AI editing suggestions in Gmail. Like, I chose to word it that way for a reason. Fuck off. Worse than cognitive offloading is outright cheating, like using these tools to write entire essays for you. Obviously, tools like ChatGPT make it easier to cheat. But interestingly, researchers at Stanford University conducted a study on academic cheating with AI and found that these tools changed the way students cheat, but did not create new cheaters. This makes sense if you think about it, because cheating has always been rampant, as it was never particularly difficult. Kids have been copying each other's homework since time immemorial. It goes without saying that cheating is bad, because you're cheating yourself out of learning, yada yada. I didn't cheat my way through school, but I'm not going to pretend that I never cheated. I am not a rule follower, okay? I follow my own moral compass. So if you want me to follow a rule, you have to convince me to care. And when it came to certain assignments, I simply did not care. Looking back, part of it was immaturity. Like, at the time, I didn't see the point in reading Shakespeare, so I didn't view plagiarizing my friend's Hamlet essay as wrong. She willingly gave it to me, and I rewrote the whole thing in my own words, so what's the big deal? But now that I'm older and wiser, I can see how I actually did cheat myself out of learning certain skills. The reason we're taught things like long division, even though we won't need to remember it, is because in the process, we learn how to learn. The same is true for literature. You will likely forget the plot, but the process of reading Shakespeare teaches you how to understand more complicated text. I wish I had tried a bit harder in my lit classes, because then maybe I'd have a greater appreciation of literary fiction, and not feel ashamed to belong to the category of elite college students who can't understand Bleak House. I know this is an affront to BookTube, but I hate classic literature. It's a broad category, and there are a few exceptions, but I pretty much hated every classic novel I was assigned to read in school. Comprehending flowery, figurative language was never my strong suit, and unfortunately, I didn't take the time to really develop that skill. But I don't entirely blame myself. I think that kids should be given more choice in which novels to read, so they can pick ones they have at least some interest in reading. If I had been given the choice to read The Taming of the Shrew or Emma, I probably would have, because I would have actually enjoyed writing a comparative analysis of 10 Things I Hate About You or Clueless. We should be given more freedom of choice, especially early on, because books like A Separate Piece absolutely ruined my interest in trying. Throughout middle school and into freshman year of high school, I legitimately read the assigned books, but after struggling through multiple god-awful, painfully boring books, I was like, fuck this, I'm just gonna read the SparkNotes. Back in my day, we're talking pre-smartphone era, that was what parents and teachers were up in arms about. Kids these days rely too much on SparkNotes, and they had a point. Reading the SparkNotes in place of the text kind of defeats the purpose. The same can be said about LLMs, but LLMs are even more enabling. I would 100% have used ChatGPT to cheat in school, and I'm glad I didn't have access to it. It is a genuine concern. The number of students who cheat may not be increasing, but I find it hard to believe it isn't making those who do cheat worse off. Like, at least when I plagiarized my friend's Hamlet essay, I rewrote the whole thing in my own words. Would I have done that with an AI-generated essay? Probably less so. Also, without these tools, you had to find someone willing to let you copy their work. I imagine I would have cheated a lot more if I had access to ChatGPT. One thing that has lit snobs clutching their pearls is the fact that college English majors can't keep up with the reading load because high schools are now assigning passages from novels rather than whole novels. There's value in reading stuff you don't particularly want to read sometimes, including historical novels, but I think that if students were given more choice and assigned more contemporary fiction, they wouldn't lack the stamina to get through whole novels. Most people can't understand classic lit not because they're illiterate, but because they lack the historical context. Appreciating literature requires understanding, and having to constantly pause and look up certain phrases or concepts so you can understand what the fuck you're reading makes reading a drag. If we were assigned contemporary literature that is equally challenging in its themes and prose, but didn't require all of this extraneous contextual knowledge, I think students would have much greater stamina and be way less inclined to cheat. We should certainly dissuade kids from cheating and encourage reading for pleasure, but that alone won't fix the problem. To actually reduce cheating prevalence and improve literacy rates, we need to focus on increasing school funding and replacing outdated curriculums. We should all be mindful of our use of AI, just as we should all be mindful of our screen time. But we don't need to get swept up in the moral panic about AI and social media, because it's a distraction from the real threat underlying the majority of problems we see today, which is our undemocratic, growth-based economic system. Cheating would be less prevalent in a society that didn't have such warped incentive structures. Studies show that countries with larger social safety nets and lower inequality have lower levels of dishonesty. Our literacy crisis is a result of systemic failures, illustrated by the stark racial disparities in literacy rates. Socioeconomic status is a key predictor of reading proficiency. Again, I'm not saying we shouldn't discuss the potential downsides of new technology. There are obviously downsides to generative AI, and we should talk about them. But broad anti-AI sentiment is a form of scapegoating. I also find it very ironic that some of the most vehemently anti-AI advocates will cite the decline of critical thinking skills as a major concern, while demonstrating a clear lack of critical thinking skills. A key feature of critical thinking is weighing the pros and cons and considering confounding variables. You're not thinking critically if you believe generative AI is responsible for the destruction of society and see no positive uses for it. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you can stay tuned for the next one. Alright, peace out.